Chapter 1. The Mouth. The Venetian ambassador was halfway through his proposal for a revised border accord when Aurelian Stonehaven, king of the Night Court, opened his mouth and said, "This is the 4th time you've proposed this exact treaty with different margins. I've been pretending to consider it since 1847. Your cufflinks are from the wrong century, and your cologne makes my left eye water." The silence in the council chamber could have cracked marble. Fraser, seated 3 chairs down, set his pen on the table with tremendous care. "Your Majesty," he said. "Your haircut," Aurelian said, against every screaming instinct in his 450-year-old body, "makes you look like a distressed badger." "I beg your pardon?" "I don't know why I said that." Aurelian's hands were perfectly still on the arms of his chair. His voice was perfectly composed. His mouth was a traitor and a deserter, and he wanted it removed. "You look fine." "No, you don't. The badger thing stands. Someone get Douglas." Douglas was already in the doorway. He had been Aurelian's steward for 300 years, which meant he had developed the particular expression of a man watching a slow carriage accident with a notebook and a keen professional interest. "How long has it been doing this?" Douglas asked, without specifying what this was. 3 days, Aurelian stood. Every vampire in the room tracked the motion. "I offended the witch Georgia at the Ashworth reception on Friday." "You told her the wine was adequate," Douglas said. "I told her the wine was adequate, because it was adequate. She is a 300-year-old witch who has been making wine for 2 centuries, and it is, objectively, adequate." "And she cursed you." "She cursed me. Total honesty, no filter. Every private thought, spoken aloud, with no consultation from the part of my brain that has been keeping this court functional for 4 centuries. "How long have you known?" "I knew the morning after, when I told the night porter that his breath smelled like a medieval experiment in fermentation, and that I had been too polite to mention it for 90 years. 90 years. He's been on staff 90 years, Douglas. I have been smelling his breath for 90 years. Douglas made a note on his ledger, an actual note, with an actual quill. Aurelian could see, with perfect vampire eyesight, that the note read, "Day 3, Public Diplomatic Breach, the Venetian. Cufflinks. Night porter, 90 years of dental diplomacy, unprecedented." "Stop writing," Aurelian said. "I am documenting an unprecedented event." "You are documenting my humiliation." "Those are not mutually exclusive, Your Majesty." The Venetian ambassador had not moved. Aurelian turned to him. "Ambassador, I apologize for the disruption. Your proposal has merit." "No, it doesn't. Please leave." The ambassador left. Aurelian turned to the remaining council members. His mouth opened. "Don't," Douglas said. "Henry, your proposal last quarter was strategically sound, but I approved it because I was tired of reading your memos, not because I agreed with the fiscal projection." Henry set his jaw. "Ingrid, your daughter is marrying into House Sterling, and you have been lobbying me for a formal endorsement. I am not going to endorse it. Not because the match is poor, but because your daughter clearly cannot stand the boy, and everyone in this court knows it except you." Ingrid stood up. "Your Majesty, I will not sit here and—" "You should ask her, directly. She has been trying to tell you for 2 months. I can hear her heartbeat when you bring it up. It sounds like a cornered animal." The room was emptying. Vampires were leaving with the particular urgency of immortal creatures who had just realized that 4 centuries of carefully maintained social fictions were about to be read aloud like a grocery list. "Fraser," Aurelian said, to the last remaining vampire at the table. "Your mother sends her regards." "She does not actually send her regards. She told me to tell you that because she finds direct communication tedious. In her actual words, you are a disappointment, but a functional one. Ashworth left without a word. Aurelian closed his eyes. He stood very still for a long moment, the kind of stillness that reminded the empty room that it was sharing space with something that had been alive since the Reformation, and did not, strictly speaking, need to breathe. "That went well," Douglas said, writing. "Get me Eva," Aurelian said. Eva Brock had been Aurelian Stonehaven's chief political advisor for 10 years, 3 months, and a number of days she had stopped counting around year 7 because counting felt unprofessional, and she was nothing if not professional. She was in the East Wing archive when Douglas found her. She had been cross-referencing the Ashworth correspondence since midnight, which was morning in Vampire Court, and she was on her 3rd cup of coffee, which was strong enough to qualify as a controlled substance. "The king has been cursed," Douglas said, in the tone of a man reporting rainfall. Eva looked up. "Cursed how?" Total honesty, every private thought spoken aloud, no filter, no control. "How bad is it?" He told Fraser his haircut resembles a distressed badger. Fraser's haircut does resemble a distressed badger. He told Ingrid that her daughter cannot stand her prospective fiancé. Can she? No, but that is not information a king is meant to volunteer in a diplomatic session. What else? He told the Venetian ambassador his cologne makes his left eye water, and that we have been pretending to consider the border accord since 1847. Eva pinched the bridge of her nose. Have we? Since 1843, actually. He rounded up. Of course he rounded up. He's polite even when he can't stop talking. She set her pen down. How long does the curse last? Unknown. The witch Georgia left the city. She left a note. What does it say? Douglas produced the note. Cream paper, an elegant, deeply irritated hand. Eva read it aloud. It ends when you speak the truth you most fear. Sincerely, Georgia. P.S. Your wine review was incorrect. It was exceptional. She read it again. The truth he most fears, she said, not the truths he finds inconvenient. Correct. So it's not the political secrets. He believes it is the political secrets. He has been confessing state intelligence to domestic staff for 3 days. The kitchen now knows about the Ashworth succession crisis. The gardener has been briefed on our Eastern territorial dispute. The footman in the North Corridor has been told, apparently unbidden, that his posture is adequate but not inspiring. Eva almost smiled. He told the footman about his posture? He told the footman, the housekeeper, and, regrettably, a visiting emissary from the Stirling Court who happened to be passing through the hall at the wrong moment. What did he tell the emissary? That Fraser Stirling's poetry is technically competent and emotionally vacant, direct quote. I have it in my records. You're keeping records. I am documenting an unprecedented event in 400 years of service. You're enjoying this. I am a professional, Ms. Brock. She gave him a look. He gave her one back. 300 years of stewardship had given Douglas the ability to say absolutely nothing with complete precision. I'll go talk to him, she said, standing and gathering her papers. Ms. Brock. She stopped. The curse appears to be proximity sensitive. His confessions become more specific in the presence of certain individuals. Specific how? I would not wish to prejudice your assessment. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in Douglas's expression was doing careful arithmetic that she was not yet ready to solve. Fine, she said, and went. She found Aurelian in his study. He was standing at the window, which was a bad sign. Because Aurelian Stonehaven standing at the window meant Aurelian Stonehaven was trying to hold himself together, and the window was the only thing in the room that wouldn't talk back. Your Majesty. He turned. Something crossed his face. A flicker. Not quite panic, not quite pain, not quite the expression of a man watching a very important wall develop a very specific crack. Eva, he said. Good. Yes. I need you to draft a formal apology to the Venetian delegation. Also, you changed your perfume 3 weeks ago and I haven't recovered. The room went very quiet. I'm sorry, she said. What? I changed nothing about my schedule, nothing about my routine, but you changed your perfume. And for 3 weeks I have been arriving at council meetings 2 minutes early because the room smells like you before you arrive. And it's the only part of the day He closed his mouth, opened it, closed it again. His jaw was tight enough to crack. That was not what I intended to say. Eva was very still. Your Majesty. Your briefing on the Ashworth border dispute, he said, and she could see him trying, physically trying to redirect, the tendons in his neck pulling like cables, was the finest piece of strategic analysis I've read in 400 years. I've read it 11 times. The analysis is not the reason I've read it 11 times. Your marginalia. You write notes to yourself in the margins. In one of them, you drew a small, angry face next to Fraser's proposal, and I think about it every day. His hands were perfectly still on the windowsill. His breathing had stopped. Not a pause, stopped. Because he was a vampire and breathing was a choice, and he had just used all of his choices on the wrong sentences. I am going to leave the room now, he said, with the tremendous dignity of a man who has just set himself on fire and would like to find a lake. Please draft the apology. Disregard everything I said after the word delegation. Aurelian. He stopped at the door. He did not turn around. Is this going to keep happening? Yes. Every time I'm in the room? I believe so. What happens when you're alone? When I'm alone, I tell the furniture that the Pureblood Council's fiscal policy is a relic of the 17th century, and that Henry's memo formatting is a crime against governance. He paused. When you're in the room, I apparently tell you about your perfume, and the angry face. And the angry face. His hand was on the doorframe. His knuckles were white. I am sorry, Eva. For what? For making your working environment uncomfortable. You told me my angry face drawing lives in your head rent-free. That is not the professional crisis you think it is. He almost looked at her. Almost. The muscle at his jaw worked. He left. Eva stood in the empty study. The room smelled like old paper and cold stone and, faintly, like him, which was something she had noticed 4 years ago and never mentioned to anyone. She sat down at his desk. She opened the Ashworth file. She looked at the marginalia. The small, angry face was still there. Right, she said. This is going to be a problem. Chapter 2. The Proximity Problem. The system Eva devised was simple, efficient, and lasted approximately 4 hours. The 10-foot rule, she explained to Douglas, who was taking notes. I work from the East Wing. He stays in the West. All communication through written memoranda. No face-to-face meetings until the curse is resolved. And council sessions? I'll attend by proxy. You can relay my analysis. Ms. Brock, you are aware that you are proposing to run the political apparatus of a vampire court through the equivalent of a very elaborate game of telephone. I am aware. And the Ashworth Alliance vote is in 4 days. I am also aware of that. And the king becomes functionally incoherent when you are in the room. That is precisely why the 10-foot rule exists. Douglas made a note. She could not see what it said. She suspected it said something like, Day 4, East Wing Containment Protocol. The advisor believes distance will help. It will not. The 10-foot rule collapsed at 9:30 the following morning, when Fraser demanded a hearing on the border accord, and the king was contractually required to receive him in the presence of his chief advisor. And Eva walked into the council chamber, and Aurelian said, without preamble, You're wearing the blue. The blue does a thing to your collarbones that I have been not commenting on for 6 years. Ashworth, sit down. We'll hear your proposal. Ashworth sat. Eva did not look at her collarbones. Ms. Brock, your strategic assessment of the Ashworth position, please. Their primary leverage is the Eastern Corridor, she said, in her most professional voice, which was the voice she used when she was concentrating very hard on not setting anything on fire. They control transit rights through— She's right, obviously, Aurelian said. She's always right. I have been following her strategic recommendations for 9 years, and she has been wrong twice, both times about catering, and I should have told her that instead of pretending I arrived at the same conclusions independently. Your Majesty. Also, you're doing the thing with your pen, the one where you tap it against your bottom lip when you're thinking. I need you to stop doing that, because I have been watching you do that for 10 years, and every single time I lose approximately 2 minutes of cognitive function. Ashworth was staring with the expression of a man reconsidering several centuries of political alliance. Fraser, Eva said, with the composure of a woman who had spent a decade managing a vampire king and was therefore prepared for most forms of catastrophe. Perhaps we should reschedule. Perhaps we should, Ashworth said faintly. Your Majesty, are you— well? I am cursed, Fraser. I am not well. I have not been well for 4 days. Also, your border proposal has genuine merit, which I have never said aloud, because admitting your position has merit weakens mine, and I have been pretending to be unimpressed by your diplomacy for decades. You are an excellent diplomat. I want to stop talking now. Ashworth blinked. Thank you? Don't thank me. I didn't choose to say it. Also, your mother doesn't actually send her regards. I told you that last week because I thought it would be diplomatic. My mother. We should stop discussing your mother. We should discuss the border accord. The border accord is safe. The border accord doesn't have collarbones. Eva went very still. I'll return Thursday, Ashworth said, rising with admirable speed. Thursday is acceptable. Goodbye, Fraser. Your proposal will be seriously considered. I mean that. I hate that I mean that. Please leave. Ashworth left. Douglas lingered, quill poised. You too, Douglas. I believe the phrase, the border accord doesn't have collarbones, merits documentation. Douglas. Departing. He made a final mark in his ledger and withdrew. The note, had Eva been able to read it, said, Day 4. The pen, the collarbones, the blue. The border accord doesn't have collarbones. Proximity breach at 9:30. Escalation consistent with projection. Accelerating. They were alone. Aurelian was standing behind his chair. He had both hands on the back of it. He was looking at a point approximately 6 inches above her head. I am going to try, he said, to have a conversation with you that does not involve me saying anything catastrophic. I am going to focus on the Ashworth vote. The Ashworth vote is important. The Ashworth vote is Aurelian. His name in her mouth. He went still, not human still, vampire still. The kind where the clock kept ticking and the fire kept crackling and the man in the chair did not move for so long that the room itself seemed to hold its breath. The truth you most fear, she said, quietly. George's note. You've been speaking truths for 4 days. Political secrets, diplomatic opinions, the Venetian cologne, Ashworth's hair. Yes. Those aren't the truth you most fear. He said nothing. Aurelian, what is the truth you most fear? And there it was. The question he had been orbiting for 4 days like a planet around a collapsing star. The question he could feel pulling at his chest, at his jaw, at the hinge of every carefully constructed sentence he had ever built in 450 years. I'm not going to answer that, he said. Can you not answer it? He stopped. His throat worked. I can. I am choosing not to. The curse lets you choose? The curse lets me choose things that are not in the room with me. His eyes dropped to hers, and she saw it. The thing she had been pretending not to see for years. The thing behind the composure and the centuries and the diplomatic precision. The raw, furious, terrified thing that lived underneath every measured sentence he had ever spoken in her direction. When you are in the room, I cannot choose anything. She should have left. She didn't. What do you mean? You've listened to it 11 times. Your briefing? My briefing. The Ashworth one. He exhaled. It wasn't a breath. It was the shape of a breath, the muscle memory of something he hadn't needed in centuries. I downloaded it to my phone. Not for the strategic analysis. For your voice. You downloaded a 40-page policy briefing for my voice. You do a thing at the 40-second mark. You pause. And I can hear you thinking. I have memorized the pause. Aurelian. I listen to your voice memos on repeat. Not the words, the pauses. The parts where you forget you're being recorded and you hum. You can hear me hum? I can hear you hum from my study. I can hear you hum through 2 stone walls and a corridor. The melody is from something I don't know. I've tried to find it. I searched the internet, which I still do not fully understand despite the tutorial you gave me in 2019. I searched for 3 years. It doesn't exist in any archive or database. His hand on the chair was white-knuckled. I think it might be something you made up, and the fact that there is a melody in the world that only exists inside your head and I will never hear the full version of it is… He stopped. Is what? She said. Is the kind of thought I have been not saying for 10 years. He pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, a gesture so human it startled her. Also, your playlists. My playlists? You have a playlist on your phone called Sad. I can hear it through your earbuds from my study. You've been listening to my playlists. For 6 years. The sad one. The working one. The one you play on Friday evenings with too much cello that makes you hum along. Also the one you only play once a year, on a date I eventually identified as your mother's birthday. He paused. Eva, who organizes their grief into a playlist. Who does that? It is the most human thing I have ever encountered, and every time you press play on the one called Sad, I have to leave my study and stand in the corridor until I can think about something else. You leave your study? I leave my study. Every time. Douglas has documented it. He calls them the corridor episodes. He thinks I'm having a crisis. I am having a crisis. I have been having a crisis for 6 years. The crisis is a playlist called Sad, and the woman who made it. That is… She stopped, started, stopped again. That is the most unhinged thing anyone has ever said to me. I know. You've been listening to my sad music through walls for 6 years. I am aware of how it sounds. It sounds insane. It is insane. I am insane. I have been insane since approximately year 4 of your employment, and I have managed it very well until this week. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. The Vampire King stood behind his chair and did not breathe, and did not move, and did not take his eyes off the woman he had been carefully, meticulously, professionally in love with for a decade. Douglas said the curse is proximity sensitive, she said. Douglas is correct. He said it gets worse when I'm close. It doesn't get worse, it gets more accurate. He paused. The curse makes me say what I'm thinking. When you're not here, I think about politics. When you're here, I think about you. The curse hasn't changed what I think, Eva. It's just removed the lock. She stood up. She gathered her papers. She did not look at him. I'm going to find Georgia, she said. We're going to fix this. Thank you. And Aurelian? Yes? The melody is from a song my mother used to sing. It doesn't have a name. She left. He stood at the window for a very long time after that. Douglas found him there an hour later. Neither of them spoke. Douglas made a note. The note said, Day 4, 11:30. He is still at the window. She told him about the melody. I believe the situation has become structural. Chapter 3. The Truth He Most Feared. Eva found the witch in 3 days. Not through political channels. Not through Douglas's network. Through sheer, grinding, mortal competence. Because that was what Eva Brock did when the world came apart at the seams. She worked the problem. Georgia was in a cottage 40 miles north, drinking her own wine and looking deeply unrepentant. He called it adequate, Georgia said. He was being diplomatic. He was being wrong. It's an extraordinary vintage. I've been perfecting the grape varietal for 160 years. The curse, Eva said, ends when he speaks the truth he most fears. I told him. He's been speaking truths for a week. Political intelligence, personal opinions, the Venetian ambassador's cologne. Those are truths he finds inconvenient. Georgia poured herself more wine. It was, Eva had to admit, exceptional wine. The curse doesn't care about inconvenient. It cares about the one truth he would rather die than say. What if he never says it? Then he'll be honest forever. Georgia shrugged. Worse fates for a king. The court is in chaos. The court was in chaos before. Now it's in honest chaos. Improvement, I'd argue. The truth he most fears, Eva said. It's not political. No, Georgia agreed. It's personal. Usually is. You knew, when you cursed him. I'm a witch, dear. I knew the moment I did it. Georgia refilled her glass. His aura was practically screaming. 400 years of restraint, and underneath it, just the one thing. Pulsing away like a second heartbeat he's never had. What thing? Georgia looked at her with the patience of a woman who had been alive long enough to find the question charming. You know what thing? Eva said nothing. He's been in love with someone for a very long time, Georgia said. And the idea of saying it out loud terrifies him more than anything the Pure Blood Council has ever done. Why would that terrify him? He's a king. He's faced wars, council coups, assassination attempts, and survived all of them by being careful, by saying exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, by never once, in 450 years, saying the wrong thing. Georgia set her glass down. The wrong thing, in this case, being the true thing. Because she works for him. Because he's her king and she's mortal, and the power imbalance alone could crush her. Because he's spent 10 years being precisely the right amount of warm and precisely the right amount of distant, so that she never feels pressured and he never has to find out what she'd say. And if she said yes? Georgia tilted her head. Is that what she'd say? Eva looked at the wine. It was exceptional. Georgia was right. Aurelian had been wrong. He's been wrong about a lot of things this week, she said. Just the one thing, Georgia said. Just the one thing, for a very long time. Can you undo it? The curse? It undoes itself. The moment he says the truth he most fears, it ends. The honesty stops. The filter comes back. She paused. That's the cruelty, by the way, not the cursing. The cruelty is that once he says it, he gets his control back. And then he has to live with having said it, without the excuse of the curse to hide behind. You planned that. I planned that. You're vindictive. He called my wine adequate. I've been perfecting it for 160 years. It's very good wine. I know. Eva stood. I need to go back. You should go back tonight. The curse has been tightening. Every day the confessions get closer to the center. Today or tomorrow, the lock breaks. And after it breaks? After it breaks, he'll be the most careful man in the world again, and you'll have heard everything, and neither of you will be able to pretend you didn't. She drove back in the dark, vampire hours. She'd been keeping vampire hours for 10 years without thinking about it. Sunrise was the end of her workday. Sunset was breakfast. He adjusted the schedule, she said to the dashboard. He moved every meeting past 3 so I could have daylight. He never told me. The road was dark. Human dark, not vampire dark. He listened to my sad playlist for 6 years. Through walls. He left his study every time I played it because he couldn't bear to hear me grieve from 2 corridors away, and he couldn't come to me because that would mean explaining how he knew I was grieving, and that would mean explaining the vampire hearing, and that would mean… She stopped. Being honest. She drove. I corrected his French on my 3rd day. I was 20 years old, and he thought, oh, this is going to ruin me. And then he spent 10 years being ruined and never said a word. She pulled into the court grounds as the clock struck 11. The halls were alive. Vampire hours. She had learned to read the rhythm of a court that never slept. The way voices echoed differently at midnight versus 3 in the morning. The way the lamplight changed as the older vampires emerged from their quarters for the late sessions. She found him in the council chamber. It was empty except for Aurelian and Douglas. The Ashworth vote is tomorrow, Douglas said. I know. The king cannot attend the vote without speaking. I know. If Ms. Brock is in the room, he will almost certainly tell Fraser something about either collarbones, playlists, or the ongoing situation with the pen. The situation with the pen is not ongoing, Douglas, Aurelian said from the head of the table, very quietly. The situation with the pen has been ongoing for 10 years. That is the definition of ongoing. I stand corrected. You are standing there taking notes. I am standing here providing the only consistent documentation of what may be the most significant event in this court in 4 centuries. Douglas, the most significant event in this court in 4 centuries was the purity law crisis of 1873. With respect, Your Majesty, the purity law crisis did not require you to publicly admit that a woman's collarbones render border policy incoherent. Aurelian closed his eyes. When he opened them, Eva was standing in the doorway. Something happened to his face. Not a shift, not a crack. A kind of catastrophic internal event that expressed itself in nothing more than the muscle at his jaw tightening once and going still. You went to see Georgia, he said. Yes. What did she say? That the truths you've been telling aren't the right one. That the curse doesn't want political secrets or diplomatic opinions. It wants the one you'd rather die than say. I know which one it is, he said. She stopped. You know? I've known since the first day. His voice was very quiet. The managed mode, the diplomatic precision, the 4 centuries of court training, all of it crumbling at the edges like wet paper. I've been trying not to be in the same room as you, because every time I am, it gets closer to the surface. Every day the confessions get more specific. First it was the perfume, then the briefing, then the voice memos, then the pen, then the collarbones. Every day it goes deeper, like it's digging through layers, and at the bottom… He stopped. At the bottom, she said. At the bottom, there's just the one thing. And I have been building walls around it for 10 years, and the curse has been taking them apart, brick by brick, and I am running out of bricks. Douglas stood. I'll leave. Stay, Aurelian said. If you leave, there will be no witness to the fact that I tried to stop this. Your Majesty. Eva. Her name, just her name, and the way he said it, the weight of it, The 10 years of saying it in meeting rooms and council chambers and briefing sessions. Always with the correct professional intonation, never with the thing underneath it that made it a different word entirely. You have a freckle behind your left ear. I have been aware of it for 7 years. I rearranged the spring council seating so you would sit on my left and I could see it during sessions. Aurelian. I adjusted the court schedule 3 years ago so that nothing critical happens before 3 in the afternoon, because you are mortal and you need daylight hours, and you had given them up for me without my asking. And I couldn't. I could not let you keep doing that without at least giving you the option. You changed the... She stared at him. I thought the council just shifted naturally. Nothing in this court shifts naturally. Everything is a decision. And every decision I have made for 10 years has had you somewhere inside it, buried so deep that no one could find it, not even you. And I was so careful, Eva. I was so goddamn careful. And this curse has undone a decade of careful in a week. Tell me, she said. He looked at her. 450 years of looking at things, watching kingdoms rise and fall, watching centuries turn over, watching mortal lives flicker and go out like candles in a draft. He had seen everything a creature of his age could see. He had thought everything a creature of his age could think. He had never said this. I have been in love with you for 10 years, 4 months, and 11 days. His voice was barely above a whisper. My subconscious keeps a tally. I don't know why. I started counting the morning you corrected my pronunciation of bureaucracy and told me it wasn't a French word anymore, and I should stop treating it like one. You were 20 years old and you had been in my court for 3 days, and you corrected a king in his own language, and I thought, oh, this is going to ruin me. The room was very quiet. And it has, he said. It has ruined me. Every day for 10 years. You hum a melody I can't identify. You draw angry faces in your margins. You tap your pen against your lip when you're thinking, and I lose entire minutes of council sessions. You wear blue, and it does things to your collarbones that I am not equipped to process, even after 4 centuries of processing things. I listen to your voice memos on repeat. I have memorized the pauses. I have memorized the parts where you forget you're being recorded. I know which playlist you play when you're sad. I know it's called Sad because you told your phone, and I could hear it from my study. And Eva, who organizes their grief into a playlist, who does that? It's the most human thing I've ever encountered, and He stopped. The silence lasted a beat. 2, 3. Also, I would like to kiss you, he said, very quietly. Also, I am terrified. Also, your heartbeat has increased by 12 beats per minute. I can hear it from here, and I need you to leave this room before The curse broke. He felt it go. Like a wire snapping, like a bone setting, like the sudden absence of pressure behind his sternum that he hadn't realized was there until it was gone. His mouth closed. The room was absolutely silent. Douglas's quill had stopped moving. Eva was standing 6 feet away. Her eyes were very wide. Her heartbeat, which he could still hear, which he would always be able to hear, was running at a rate that suggested she was either terrified or something else entirely. The curse, she said. Is broken, he said. His voice sounded wrong to him, flat, controlled. The filter was back, the diplomatic precision, the measured sentences. 450 years of composure clicking back into place like a lock. You said. I know what I said. 10 years. I know. 4 months. I know. 11 days. I know, Eva. You've been counting since I corrected your French. I have been counting since you corrected my French. And the playlists. And the playlists. And the voice memos. Yes. And you would like to kiss me. His jaw tightened, the managed mode, the composure. It was all coming back, clicking into place like armor, and she could see it happening in real time. The shutters closing, the precision returning, the 450-year-old mask sliding back over the man, who had just been standing in front of her with nothing between them at all. "I said that," he said. "I did not choose to say it. I know. It was the curse. I know. It will not happen again." She looked at him, he looked at her, and something passed between them that neither of them could name, because it was the thing that had lived in the space between his measured sentences for 10 years, and naming it would have made it real, and real things, as Georgia had said, could be lost. "I need to think," she said. She left. Aurelian sat in the council chamber. He did not move. Douglas did not move. The fire burned low. The clock struck midnight, then 1, then 2. At 2:30, Douglas said, very quietly, "She hasn't left the building." Aurelian said nothing. "She went to her office. She has been there for 3 hours. She is not working." "How do you know she's not working?" "Because the light hasn't changed. When she works, she moves the lamp. When she sits and thinks, the lamp stays still." "You've been watching her lamp." "I have been watching everyone's lamp for 300 years, Your Majesty. It is called stewardship." "I heard you." Douglas closed his ledger. He set his quill down. He looked at his king for a long moment with the expression of a man who has been watching the same slow-motion catastrophe for 3 centuries and has finally seen it hit the ground. "For what it's worth," Douglas said, "my documentation will show that you tried." Aurelian almost smiled. Almost. The muscle at his jaw worked once and then went still. "Douglas." "Your Majesty. In 300 years of service, have you ever seen me make a mistake this large?" "No." Douglas paused. "But I have also never seen you care about something this much. The two are not unrelated." "I told her about the playlists, Douglas. I told her, I leave my study every time she plays the sad one. I told her, I searched the internet for 3 years, trying to find her mother's melody." "You did search the internet for 3 years. That is not the point. The point is that you did the searching. The curse only told her about it." Aurelian looked at his steward. Douglas looked back. 300 years. A long time to know someone. Not long enough, apparently, to be prepared for this. "Go home, Douglas." "This is my home, Your Majesty. I live here." "Then go to your quarters." Going. Aurelian stayed. Chapter 4. The Silence. The court noticed immediately, not the curse breaking, they noticed the quiet. He chaired the entire Ashworth session without a single involuntary disclosure, Douglas reported to Ingrid in the corridor afterward. Seamless efficiency, diplomatic grace, classic form. "No mention of the badger?" Ingrid asked. "None." "No mention of the perfume?" "None." "No mention of the collarbones, or the pen, or the border accord not having?" "Ingrid, the king has been restored to full composure. I would suggest we accept this with gratitude and move on." Ingrid moved on. Douglas made a note in his ledger. Day 8, curse broken, composure restored. The court is relieved. I am not. Eva attended the Ashworth session from the East Wing, relaying her analysis through written memoranda. Professional, efficient. The 10-foot rule, reinstated without discussion, applied without question. 3 days passed. Aurelian worked. He drafted correspondence in a hand so precise it could have been typeset. He reviewed territorial maps. He stood at his window at night and told himself he was thinking about border disputes. On the second night, Douglas brought a blood service to his study. Crystal decanter, temperature-controlled, anonymous donor. "You haven't fed in 4 days," Douglas said. "I've been busy." "You've been avoiding the dining chamber because Ms. Brock sometimes uses the East Corridor at this hour." Aurelian poured. he drank. The blood was adequate, a word that had once been sufficient for everything in his life, and now tasted like ash. "How is she?" he asked, and hated himself for asking. "Professional," Douglas said. "Efficient. She filed the Ashworth analysis on time. She reorganized the East Wing archive. She has not asked about you." "Good." "She has, however, stopped playing her playlists." Aurelian set the glass down. His hand was steady. His reflection did not exist in the window glass. "All of them?" "All of them, including the Friday cello one, including the working one. She has been working in silence for 3 days." Aurelian said nothing. "Your Majesty, I have been documenting this situation for 10 days. My professional assessment is that the silence is worse than the curse." "Your professional assessment is noted." "My professional assessment is that you are sitting in a dark room drinking blood you can't taste and pretending you're not listening for a heartbeat 3 corridors away." Douglas. Departing. But he paused at the door. "She can never see your reflection," Douglas said quietly. "She can never adjust your collar in a mirror or catch your eye across a glass. Every look between the two of you has to be direct, deliberate. That is a cruelty and a gift, Your Majesty. Don't waste the gift by looking away." He left. Aurelian stood at the window. The decanter sat half-empty on his desk. The court hummed with its nighttime business below, and from 3 corridors away, silence, where there used to be a playlist called Sad and the Woman Who Made It. On the 3rd evening, Eva was in the East Wing archive, cross-referencing the Ashworth Alliance terms when she set her pen down and said to no one, "I'm not processing the confession." The room did not respond. "I processed the confession in approximately 40 minutes. He's been in love with me for 10 years. I have been in love with him for 8. The arithmetic is not complicated." She stood up. She sat back down. She stood up again. "What I am processing," she said, "is the silence. Because that was the thing. The curse had stripped him bare. For 7 days she had heard the real Aurelian Stonehaven, the one underneath the centuries of composure. The one who counted days, the one who memorized pauses, the one who said her name like it cost him something and said it anyway. And then the curse broke. And the filter came back. And the man who had said all of those things became, once again, the man who would never say any of them. "He's not being quiet because he doesn't feel it," she said to the empty archive. "He's being quiet because feeling it is what he does. The silence is the managed mode, the 400 years of practice. He's rebuilding the wall, brick by brick." She stood up, sat down, stood up again. "I've been in love with the wall for 8 years. She pressed her hands flat on the desk. "And now I've heard what's behind it, and I don't want the wall back. I want the man who leaves his study every time I play my sad playlist because he can't bear to hear me grieve through 2 walls and a corridor." She was pacing now. Eva Brock did not pace. Eva Brock sat at desks and solved problems with strategy and marginal notes and a pen she tapped against her lip without thinking about it. "He can't come to me," she said. "He's my king. I'm mortal. The power imbalance. Georgia was right about that. Every approach from him would feel compulsory, tainted by the curse, indistinguishable from pressure." She stopped at the window. "He spent 10 years being careful. The curse destroyed the careful. And now he's rebuilding it. And if I don't do something, he'll succeed. And the careful will be perfect and permanent, and I will spend the rest of my mortal life watching him be precisely the right amount of warm and precisely the right amount of distant, and I will never hear the real voice again." She caught herself on the phrase, "the rest of my mortal life." She had said it without thinking. She said it again, slower. "The rest of my mortal life." The archive was very quiet. The lamp was still. 60 years, maybe, if I'm lucky. He has 450 behind him. He'll have 450 more. And one day I'll be gone, and he'll still be standing at that window, and the silence where my heartbeat used to be will be the loudest thing in his study. She sat with that for a moment. It sat with her. She sat down. She found a piece of paper. She found her pen. The pen, the one she tapped against her lip. The one he had been watching for 10 years. So, she said, I go to him. She wrote the note. She walked to his study. The door was closed, light underneath. She slid the note under the door. She stood there. On the other side, she heard nothing. No footsteps, no paper being picked up. But she knew. She knew because she had worked for him for 10 years, and she knew the quality of his silences. The silence of concentration. The silence of displeasure. The silence of a vampire who has stopped breathing because something has happened that requires the full capacity of his 450-year-old brain. This was the third kind. She heard the paper being lifted, very slowly. She heard nothing for a long time. Then his voice, through the door, barely audible even to her, standing inches away. 8 years? 2 less than you, she said. I'm a slower learner. Silence. A long one. A vampire one. You've been counting? Since the morning you held my chair for me during the Ashworth reception. Your hand touched my shoulder. It was cold. And I realized I didn't mind. You didn't mind. I thought, oh, I'm going to have a problem. A problem. You're repeating everything I'm saying. I am aware. I am also standing on the other side of a closed door, having a conversation that I have imagined approximately 4,000 times, and in none of those times was there a door. She almost laughed. Almost.
Open it then.
I can't. Why? Because if I open this door and you're standing there because you feel obligated, because you feel pressured, because the curse made you hear things you didn't ask to hear, and now you think you owe me a response. I can't. The power imbalance alone. Aurelian. I am your king, you are mortal. You work for me. I have 450 years of physical advantage and political authority, and I will not be the one who opens this door. Then I'm asking you to let me in. Why? Because you memorized the pause at the 40-second mark of a policy briefing. Because you changed the court schedule so I could have sunlight and you never told me. Because you leave your study every time I play my sad playlist. Because you spent 10 years, 4 months, and 11 days in love with me, and you never once made me feel the weight of it. Not once. That is the most careful thing anyone has ever done for me, Aurelian. And I am standing on the other side of this door asking you to stop being careful. Silence. You want me to stop being careful. I want you to open the door. Those are the same thing. I know. The lock clicked. The door opened. He was standing on the other side. He was not composed. He was not measured. He was not the diplomatic, precise, centuries-old king who had chaired the Ashworth session with exemplary form 3 days ago. He was the man from the council chamber, the one who counted days and memorized pauses, and said her name like it was the last word in every sentence he would ever speak. You read the note, she said. He held it up. Her handwriting. 12 words. Your eyes do a thing too, when you think I'm not looking. Come in, he said. Chapter 5. Voluntary. She stepped inside. His study at midnight. She knew this room. She had been in this room 1,000 times for briefings, strategy sessions, late-night crisis management. She knew the desk, the papers, the window where he stood when he was holding himself together. She had never been in this room like this. "I have several things to say," Aurelian said. He was standing very still. His hands were at his sides, not the diplomatic stillness, the real stillness, the one where the predator underneath was so close to the surface that even the air felt different. "I would like to say them without the curse making the decision for me." "Go ahead." "I would like to try this." He said it carefully, each word chosen, placed. Not the runaway horse of the curse, but the deliberate, voluntary act of a man who had spent 450 years choosing his words and was, for the first time, choosing the right ones. "I would like to try this without every sentence being a disaster." "That might be worse," she said. "You might choose not to say things." "I will choose to say things, different things, possibly better things, on purpose." "On purpose." "I have been told," he said, with a flicker of something that was almost dangerously humor, "that I am capable of precision." She laughed. It came out small and surprised, and it changed the shape of the room. He watched it happen. He watched the way laughter moved through her face, the way it started at her eyes and traveled to her mouth and ended at a place near her jaw that he had been carefully not studying for 10 years. "The power imbalance," she said. "You're my king. I work for you." "Yes. You've been worried about that for 10 years. Among other things. Aurelian, I corrected your French on my 3rd day. The power imbalance has been theoretical since approximately 2016. Something happened to his face. Not a smile. Vampires of his age and composure did not smile like humans smiled. But something shifted, something loosened, something in the architecture of his expression rearranged itself into a configuration that she had never seen before because it had never existed before. "I'm going to take a step toward you," he said. "Tell me if you want me to stop." "You don't have to narrate. I know. I want to. I spent a week with my mouth making decisions without my consent. I would like my consent to be visible." She nodded. He took a step. Then another. He was close enough now that she could feel the temperature difference. His ambient cold against her ambient warmth. The core sensory reality of what they were. Vampire and mortal. 450 years and 30 years. A creature who did not breathe standing close enough to a creature who did that he could hear every inhale, every exhale. The slight catch at the top of each breath that told him she was not as calm as she was pretending to be. "Your heartbeat," he said, "is doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing it does when you're in my study late at night, and you think I can't hear it." "I always assumed you could hear it." "Did you? You're a 450-year-old vampire. I assumed enhanced hearing was part of the package." "It is." "So you've been hearing my heartbeat for 10 years. I have been hearing your heartbeat for 10 years. And you never said anything." "I said many things. I said them in the correct professional register. I said, 'Excellent briefing, Ms. Brock.' I said, 'Your analysis is sound.' I said, 'Thank you, Eva, that will be all.' Every one of those sentences was a translation of a sentence I couldn't say." She looked up at him. He was close. The cold radiated from him like a season. His eyes, which she had been carefully not describing to herself for 8 years because describing them would have made the problem worse, were dark and steady, and fixed on her with the particular focus of a creature that did not blink as often as it should. "What were the original sentences?" she asked. "I could list them." His hand lifted, slowly, voluntarily. He touched the place behind her left ear, the freckle. His fingers were cold. She didn't mind. "The morning you corrected my French," he said. "The original sentence was, 'I think you might be the most interesting person I've met in 3 centuries.'" His thumb traced the edge of her ear. She was very aware of her own heartbeat. He was also very aware of her own heartbeat. The day you drew the angry face in the margins. The original sentence was, I am in serious trouble. Serious trouble. The gravest. His other hand found her waist, cold through the fabric of her shirt. She was warm, he was not. The contrast was the whole story, had always been the whole story, would always be the whole story. The night you fell asleep at my desk during the Ashworth crisis. You slept for 4 hours. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I sat across from you and watched you sleep, and the original sentence was, I think this might be the first time in 400 years that I've been afraid. Afraid of what? Of you leaving. She kissed him, not dramatically. Not with the sweeping cinematography of the moment. She just leaned up and kissed him, and his mouth was cold and hers was warm, and the temperature contrast was exactly what she had spent 8 years imagining, and nothing like what she had spent 8 years imagining. Because imagination didn't include the way his hand tightened at her waist or the way his breath caught. An involuntary human reflex from a creature who hadn't been human in 4 centuries. Or the way he said her name against her mouth like a man finding a word he'd been looking for in a language he'd almost given up learning. Eva. That's the one, she said. That's the way you said it during the curse. I know. Do it again. Eva. On purpose that time? On purpose. She smiled against his mouth. He did not smile, because vampires of his vintage did not smile like that. But the muscle at his jaw, the one she had been watching work and release for a decade, did something new. It relaxed. For the first time since she had known him, it relaxed completely. She pulled back, looked at him. You're cold, she said. I'm always cold. I know, I've known for 10 years. And you stayed. I stayed. I kept your schedule. I drafted your correspondence. I reorganized your archive twice. I sat in your council chambers at 2 in the morning and I never once thought about leaving. Why not? She looked at him with an expression he had never seen before, because in 10 years of studying her face, he had cataloged every expression she had, and this was new. This was something she had been keeping behind her own managed mode, her own professional composure, her own decade of careful. Because you held my chair, she said, and your hand was cold, and I didn't mind. He kissed her forehead, cold lips against warm skin. She closed her eyes. I have a concern, he said. Already? You are mortal. I am not. I know. At some point, that becomes a conversation. It's becoming one now. He pulled back slightly, not away, just enough to see her face. Eva. 60 years, she said. Maybe 70 if I'm lucky and keep eating vegetables. And then I'm gone, and you're still here, and the study is quiet, and the playlists stop. Don't. You listened to my sad playlist through walls for 6 years because you couldn't bear to hear me grieve. What happens when the playlists stop permanently? He said nothing. His hand at her waist went very still. The predator stillness, the one that meant something underneath, was too close to the surface. I've been thinking about this, she said. Not tonight, not because of the confession. I've been thinking about it for 2 years. 2 years. Since the night you held court for 11 hours during the Sterling crisis, and I watched you not blink once for the entire session. And I thought, he's going to be doing this in 300 years, and I won't be here. And that thought was the worst thing I'd ever felt, and I didn't have a playlist for it. Eva, I will not ask you to. I know you won't. That's the point. You would never ask. You would watch me age, you would watch me slow down, you would watch me die, and you would stand at that window and you would not move, and you would not breathe, and you would add my name to the list of things you lost, and you would keep going. Because that is what you do. She looked at him. I am not going to let you do that. The turning is not a small thing. I know what the turning is. It's days. It's painful. It's identity altering. You would lose. He stopped. You would lose the daylight, the warmth, the heartbeat I have been listening to for 10 years. You would become what I am. Cold, still, a thing that feeds. A thing that feeds and listens to sad playlists through walls, and counts the days since someone corrected his French, and draws angry faces in his own marginalia and memorizes the pauses. She put her hand on his jaw, cold skin under warm fingers. Aurelian, you are the best thing I have ever known, and I would like to know you for longer than 60 years. You're certain. I corrected a king's French on my 3rd day. I have never been uncertain about anything in my life. That's not true. You were uncertain about the catering. Twice. I was uncertain about the catering twice. Everything else has been very clear. He almost laughed. Not quite. The architecture of his face shifted in the way it did when something new happened, something he hadn't experienced in 450 years, and the closest word for it was joy. I would need time, she said. Not tonight. I want to do this deliberately. I want it to be voluntary. Voluntary. If a curse taught us anything, it's that the chosen version is better than the forced one. He looked at her for a very long time. 450 years of looking at things. And this was new. This was a mortal woman standing in his study, telling him she wanted to stay. Not for a lifetime, but for all of it. And she was saying it without a curse, without pressure, without the excuse of honesty forced on her by a vindictive witch and a bottle of adequate wine. When you're ready, he said, not before. When I'm ready. And you'll tell me. I'll tell you. She paused. Probably with a note slid under a door. It seems to work. It does seem to work. The day you reorganized my East Wing archive without being asked, the original sentence was, I think she might be running this court better than I am, and I find that devastatingly attractive. Devastatingly. I am 450 years old. I do not use the word lightly. The door opened. Douglas stood in the doorway. He looked at them. He looked at his ledger. He made a note. Post-curse behavioral shift documented, he said. Tuesday, midnight. Douglas. Your Majesty, I have been cataloging this situation for 10 days. I would like it noted that my projections were accurate within a 48-hour margin. Douglas, leave. I should mention that I placed a quiet wager with Ingrid. She gave it a month. I gave it 10 days. You bet on this? I documented the probability. The wagering was incidental. Douglas? Leaving, Your Majesty. He paused. Ms. Brock, your briefing on the Ashworth Alliance terms is due at 3. I assume you will be late. The Ashworth vote passed this afternoon, Douglas. Unanimously. It passed unanimously because Fraser was so disoriented by the Collarbones incident that he accepted terms he would have negotiated for another decade. Are you suggesting my curse improved our diplomatic position? I am suggesting that telling a man his haircut resembles a distressed badger and then confessing your undying love for your advisor in his presence created a negotiating environment that traditional diplomacy could not have achieved. Yes. Get out, Douglas. I am already out. This is me. Out. Documenting from the corridor. The door closed. He bet on us, Eva said. He has been betting on us for approximately 3 centuries longer than either of us has been betting on us. That's not comforting. It is mildly comforting. It means we were obvious. We were not obvious. Eva, I told the entire council that the border accord doesn't have collarbones. We were obvious. She laughed. He watched it happen again. The way it started at her eyes and moved through her face and ended at the place near her jaw he had been carefully not studying for 10 years and was now, for the first time, permitted to study. I have a concern, she said. You already had a concern. Is this a second concern? This is the same concern wearing a different hat. I work for you. Tomorrow morning I sit in a council chamber and brief you on territorial policy, and you sit at the head of the table and pretend I haven't just been in your study at midnight. I have 450 years of pretending. I am exceptional at pretending. You told Fraser about my collarbones. That was the curse. You said it with your whole chest, Aurelian. The curse said it with my whole chest. I would have been far more subtle. Would you? No, probably not. But I would have liked the option. They stood in the study, his hand at her waist, her hand on his chest where a heartbeat would have been and wasn't. The silence where a heartbeat should have been, except it wasn't silence anymore because hers was loud enough for both of them. I have a question, she said. Yes? The playlist, the one I play when I'm sad, the one called Sad. I can hear it through your earbuds from my study. I know, vampire hearing. How long have you been listening? 6 years. You've been listening to my sad playlist for 6 years? Also your working playlist. Also the one you play on Friday evenings that has too much cello and makes you hum. Also the one you only play once a year on your mother's birthday that has the melody. The melody you told me about. He paused. I still haven't found it anywhere. It doesn't exist anywhere. My mother made it up. I know. You know? I searched extensively. I used the internet, which I do not fully understand despite your repeated attempts to explain it to me. I searched for 3 years. The melody does not exist in any archive, any recording, any database. It exists only inside your head. And the fact that I will never hear the full version. You can hear it now, she said. I'll hum it for you. He went still. Not vampire still, something else. Something older and more fragile than stillness. You'll. If you want. I want. She hummed, soft, the melody her mother used to sing. A melody that had no name and no recording and no home except the inside of her head and the cold study of a vampire king who had been listening through walls for 6 years. He closed his eyes. She finished. Again, he said very quietly. Please. She hummed it again. Later, at 3 a.m, she sat at his desk drafting the Ashworth response. He read over her shoulder. She paused at the paragraph mark, the natural break, the place where she always paused to think. That, he said, that pause. That's my favorite sound in 450 years. She didn't look up, but she smiled. And she thought about what she'd said earlier. 60 years, maybe 70. Vegetables. She thought about the melody, the one her mother made up, the one that existed nowhere in the world except inside her head. And she thought about what would happen to that melody when she was gone. Aurelian. Yes? I don't want you to listen for my heartbeat through walls for another 60 years. He went still. I want you to hear it from the next room, for the next 400. He did not move. He did not breathe. The fire burned low and the clock ticked, and the vampire king stood behind his mortal advisor and said nothing, because the thing she had just said was new, and new things, as she had learned this week, were the only things that could still break him. You're sure, he said. I've been sure since the Sterling crisis. I've been sure since the night I watched you hold court for 11 hours without blinking, and I thought, I would like to be there for the next 11, and the next, and the next. The daylight. You moved the schedule to give me daylight. You can teach me how to miss it. The warmth. You've been cold for 450 years. You seem to manage. Eva. I know what I'm choosing. I know what it costs. I know what it changes. She set her pen down. The pen. The one she tapped against her lip. The one he had been watching for 10 years. I am choosing this the way you chose to say my name. On purpose. He leaned down, his cold forehead against her warm temple. The last time the temperature contrast would feel like this. The last time her warmth would meet his cold, and it would be two different things. When? He said. Soon. She picked up her pen. After I finish the Ashworth response. I have priorities. He almost laughed. The architecture of his face did the new thing again. The thing that had no name and no precedent in 450 years. I would like it noted, she said, still writing, that I am making this decision without a curse, without a note under a door, and without anyone telling me what to do. Noted. Voluntary. Voluntary. She finished the paragraph. She set the pen down. She looked up at him. Now, she said. And he, who had not needed to breathe in 4 centuries, took a breath anyway. Because some things are worth choosing. And choosing, it turned out, was everything.